I had a bad feeling about the nights my wife stayed late at work, so I pretended to fall asleep on the living room couch. While I was peeking, the pizza delivery guy saw me and whispered, "Sir, wait until the street light goes out. You will see and understand everything." When the street light finally flickered and went out, I stopped breathing at what I saw. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Alan, and at 58 years old I thought I knew everything there was to know about my wife. Holly and I had been married for 32 years, and I believed we had built something solid, something real. But lately something had shifted in our house. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on until those Thursday nights started becoming a pattern I could no longer ignore. It began 3 months ago. Holly, who worked as an administrative assistant at a medical office downtown, suddenly started having what she called late meetings every Thursday. At first I didn't think much of it. Work demands change, responsibilities grow, and at 54, Holly was more dedicated to her job than ever. But then I started noticing the details that didn't quite add up. The first thing that struck me was the smell. When Holly came home from these supposed late meetings, she smelled different. Not like the usual mix of office air freshener and coffee that typically clung to her clothes. Instead, there was a sweet, almost floral scent that I couldn't place. When I asked her about it, she would shrug and say something about a new air freshener at the office or a co-worker's perfume rubbing off during a long meeting. Then there were the clothes. Holly was always meticulous about her appearance, but on these Thursday nights she would come home with her blouse slightly wrinkled, her hair not quite as neat as when she left. Her lipstick would be completely gone, not just faded from a long day, but completely wiped clean. When I mentioned it once, she laughed and said she must have rubbed it off during dinner at the office. Dinner at the office. That was another thing. Holly had never mentioned eating dinner at work before these Thursday meetings started. In all our years together, she had always complained about the terrible vending machine food and how she couldn't wait to get home for a proper meal. Now suddenly she was having elaborate dinners during these late meetings. The phone calls were what really started to bother me. Holly had always been open with her phone, leaving it lying around, answering calls in front of me without a second thought. But now when her phone rang on Thursday afternoons or evenings, she would step into another room to answer it. I could hear her voice through the walls, but it was quieter, more careful, as if she was making sure I couldn't quite make out the words. One Thursday evening in early October, I decided to stay up and wait for her to come home. I told her I would be reading in the living room, maybe watching some late-night television. She kissed me goodbye at 6:30 in the evening, saying she might be home late, possibly after 11. She was wearing a navy blue dress I had bought her for her birthday 2 years ago, and she looked beautiful. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at me, something that felt like goodbye rather than see you later. I settled into my recliner with a book, but I couldn't concentrate on the words. Every car that passed by our house made me look up, wondering if it was Holly coming home. But as the hours passed, I realized I wasn't just waiting for her return. I was watching for something, though I didn't know what. At around 10:15 the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I considered not answering it. But the ring came again, more insistent this time. I opened the door to find a young man in his early 20s holding a pizza delivery bag. He looked confused, checking his phone and then looking at our house number again. "I think I have the wrong address," he said, apologizing. "I was supposed to deliver to Maple Street, but this is Elm Street, right?" "That's right," I confirmed. "Maple Street is 2 blocks over." He thanked me and started to leave, but then he paused and looked back at me. There was something odd in his expression, something almost knowing. "Sir," he said quietly, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. "I've been delivering in this neighborhood for 2 years now. I see a lot of things." I frowned, not understanding what he was getting at. "Okay," I said slowly. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That street light," he said, pointing to the lamp post at the corner of our street. "It's been acting up lately. Goes out around 11:30 most Thursday nights. Has some kind of electrical issue, I guess." I looked at the light, which was shining normally. "I hadn't noticed," I said. The delivery boy shifted the pizza bag in his arms. "Sir," he said, and there was something urgent in his voice now. "Wait until the streetlight goes out. You will see and understand everything." Before I could ask him what he meant, he was already walking away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the reach of that very streetlight he had just mentioned. I stood in my doorway for a long moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A random pizza delivery boy giving me cryptic advice about waiting for a streetlight to go out? It sounded absurd, but as I closed the door and returned to my recliner, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something I didn't. Something about my own neighborhood, my own street, possibly even about my own wife. I looked at my watch. 10:25. If the light went out around 11:30 like he said, I only had about an hour to wait. I turned off all the lights in the living room and positioned myself where I could see out the front window while still remaining hidden from view. The streetlight cast a bright circle of light on the pavement below, illuminating about half of our front yard and part of the street. Everything seemed normal, quiet, peaceful. But as I sat there in the darkness of my own living room, waiting for a streetlight to malfunction, I realized that nothing about this situation was normal. I was 58 years old, hiding in my own house, following the advice of a stranger, waiting to spy on my own wife. How had my marriage come to this? The minutes ticked by slowly. At 11 o'clock I heard a car engine in the distance and my heart rate picked up. But the car passed by without stopping. At 11:15 another car approached, slower this time. Again it continued past our house. I was beginning to feel foolish, sitting in the dark like some kind of amateur detective. Then at exactly 11:28, the streetlight began to flicker. As I watched the streetlight flicker like a dying candle, my mind began to wander through the past few months, picking up details I had somehow managed to overlook or explain away. The pizza delivery boy's words echoed in my head. "You will see and understand everything." But what was there to understand? What had I been missing? I thought back to early September, just after Labor Day weekend. Holly had been acting differently even then, though I hadn't recognized it as the beginning of a pattern. She had started taking longer showers, sometimes staying in the bathroom for 45 minutes or more. When I asked her about it, she said she was trying a new skincare routine she had read about online. It seemed innocent enough, but now, sitting in the dark, I remembered how she would emerge from those long showers looking not relaxed, but somehow agitated, as if she had been thinking hard about something troubling. There were the phone calls that came to our landline too. We still kept the old house phone, mainly for emergencies and for Holly's elderly mother to call. But in recent weeks the phone would ring, and when I answered, the caller would hang up immediately. When I mentioned it to Holly, she suggested it was probably telemarketers or wrong numbers. But telemarketers usually tried to engage you in conversation, not hang up the moment you said hello. The really strange thing was that these silent calls always seemed to come on Wednesday evenings, the night before Holly's mysterious Thursday meetings. I had never connected the two events before, but now as I waited in the darkness, the timing seemed too convenient to be coincidental. I also remembered the afternoon I came home early from my job at the hardware store and found Holly sitting at our kitchen table with papers spread out in front of her. The moment she heard my car in the driveway, she quickly gathered up the papers and shoved them into a manila envelope. When I asked what she was working on, she said it was just some insurance paperwork from her office that she needed to review at home. But I had gotten a glimpse of those papers before she whisked them away. And they hadn't looked like insurance forms. They looked like legal documents with official letterheads and dense paragraphs of text. More importantly, I could have sworn I saw my name printed at the top of one of the pages. When I asked Holly about it, she insisted I must have been mistaken. The streetlight flickered again, more violently this time, and I forced myself to focus on the present moment. It was 11:31 and the light was clearly struggling to stay on. Each flicker lasted longer than the one before, leaving brief moments of darkness that seemed to swallow the entire street corner. During one of those dark intervals, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were other lights on in the neighboring houses, lights in windows where people appeared to be awake and watching. Mrs. Henderson next door had her living room curtains pulled back just slightly, and I could see her silhouette sitting in a chair facing the window. The Garcias across the street had someone standing at their upstairs bedroom window, looking down at the street. It was as if the entire neighborhood was waiting for something to happen when that street light went out. But what did they know that I didn't? How long had this been going on? And why had no one ever mentioned anything to me? I thought about the conversations I had had with neighbors recently, trying to remember if anyone had dropped hints or made comments that might make sense now. Last week, Mrs. Henderson had been watering her front garden when I was getting my mail, and she had made an odd comment about how quiet Thursday nights had become. At the time, I thought she was just making small talk about how peaceful the neighborhood was. But now I wondered if she had been hinting at something else entirely. The light flickered again, stayed dark for nearly 10 seconds this time, then came back on weakly. In that moment of darkness, I saw a car turning onto our street from the far end. It was moving slowly, almost cautiously, with its headlights dimmed. My heart started pounding as I realized this might be Holly coming home. But as the car got closer, I could see it wasn't Holly's silver Honda Civic. This was a dark sedan, something larger and more expensive looking. The car continued down the street at that same careful pace and pulled into the driveway of a house 3 doors down from ours. I watched as someone got out, but in the dim light I couldn't make out who it was or even whether it was a man or woman. What I could see, though, was that this person looked around carefully before walking to the front door, as if making sure no one was watching. The behavior struck me as strange, almost furtive. Who comes home to their own house looking over their shoulder like they're doing something wrong? The streetlight died completely then, plunging the entire corner into darkness. The only illumination came from the scattered porch lights and window lights from various houses, creating small pools of yellow light separated by deep shadows. It was in this darkness that I heard another car approaching. This time I knew it was Holly's car. I recognized the particular sound of her engine, the slight rattle that had been getting worse over the past few months. The car slowed as it approached our street, and I could see the familiar shape of her Honda Civic in the dim glow of a distant street lamp. But Holly didn't turn into our driveway. Instead, she continued past our house and pulled over to the curb about 50 feet down the street, in a spot where the broken streetlight left her car in complete shadow. She turned off the engine and just sat there. My hands were shaking as I watched my wife of 32 years sitting in her car outside our own house, clearly not wanting to be seen. What was she waiting for? Why wasn't she coming inside? And why was she parked in the darkest spot on the street? As if in answer to my questions, another car appeared at the far end of the street. This one I didn't recognize at all. It was a white pickup truck, newer looking, with tinted windows that made it impossible to see who was driving. The truck moved even more slowly than the first car had, and as it passed under the few working street lamps, I could see that the driver was looking carefully at each house number. The truck stopped directly in front of our house. A man got out of the driver's side, and even in the poor light, I could see he was tall and broad-shouldered. He wore dark clothing and moved with purpose, but there was something careful about his movements, almost stealthy. He didn't head toward our front door, though. Instead, he walked around to the passenger side of the truck and opened that door. That's when I saw Holly get out. My wife stepped out of a stranger's truck right in front of our house at 11:35 on a Thursday night, after telling me she would be in late meetings at work. She stood close to the man for a moment, and they appeared to be talking in low voices. Then, to my complete shock, she reached up and hugged him. This wasn't a polite, professional hug. This was intimate, familiar, the kind of embrace shared between people who knew each other well. The hug lasted for what felt like minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds. When they separated, the man handed Holly something, some kind of package or envelope that she tucked quickly into her purse. But that wasn't the end of it. The man walked to the back of his truck and began unloading something from the truck bed. It was dark and bulky, wrapped in what looked like a tarp or heavy blanket. Holly helped him carry whatever it was, and together they walked toward the side of our house, disappearing into the shadows of our backyard. I sat frozen in my recliner, my mind struggling to process what I had just witnessed. Holly hadn't been at work. She had been with this man, whoever he was, and now they were in our backyard with something they clearly didn't want anyone to see. The careful timing, waiting for the streetlight to go out, the secretive behavior, the way they moved in the shadows, none of this was innocent. And suddenly I realized that the other neighbors weren't just awake by coincidence. They were watching, waiting, just like the pizza delivery boy had told me to do. They knew something was happening on Thursday nights when that streetlight went dark. Something they had been observing for who knows how long. Whatever Holly and this stranger were doing in our backyard, I was about to find out. But first I had to decide whether I really wanted to know the truth about what my wife had been doing on those Thursday nights. Because something told me that once I learned the truth, nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I forced myself to move from the recliner to the window closest to our backyard, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. The darkness outside seemed impenetrable, but I could hear voices coming from behind our house, Holly's voice and the deeper tone of a man. They were trying to speak quietly, but in the stillness of the night, sound carried further than they probably realized. I crept through our kitchen to the back door, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they would hear it. The door had a small window that looked out onto our patio, and I positioned myself where I could see without being seen. What I witnessed in those next few minutes would haunt me for the rest of my life. Holly and the man had set up some kind of work light, the kind contractors use, but they had positioned it low to the ground and partially covered it, so it wouldn't attract attention from the neighboring houses. In that dim focused beam of light, I could finally see the man's face clearly. It was my brother Marcus. Marcus, who lived 200 miles away in Birmingham. Marcus, who I hadn't seen in over 6 months. Marcus, who had supposedly been going through a difficult divorce and financial troubles. Marcus, who had asked to borrow $5,000 from me last Christmas. Money I had given him without hesitation because he was family. But seeing him here in my backyard, in the middle of the night, with my wife carrying mysterious packages, this wasn't a social visit or a cry for help. This was something planned, something secretive, something that required the cover of darkness and a broken streetlight. I watched in horror as they unwrapped what they had been carrying. It wasn't just one package. There were several items wrapped in heavy plastic and duct tape. The way they handled these bundles, carefully and methodically, suggested they had done this before. This wasn't their first time in my backyard on a Thursday night. Holly pulled out a folding shovel from one of the bags Marcus had brought, the kind campers use for digging fire pits. But they weren't planning a campfire. Marcus began clearing away leaves and debris from a spot near our garden shed, a spot that was hidden from view of the neighboring houses by our privacy fence. As I watched my wife and my brother work together with practiced efficiency, the horrible truth began to crystallize in my mind. The Thursday night meetings that weren't really meetings. The mysterious phone calls. The legal documents Holly had been hiding. The way she had been acting differently for months. Not like a woman having an affair, but like a woman carrying an enormous secret. They weren't having an affair. They were planning something much worse. I listened as they spoke in hushed tones while they worked. "How much longer do you think we need?" Holly asked, and her voice sounded strained, nervous. "Not much longer," Marcus replied. "Once this is buried deep enough, we'll be ready for the next phase." Next phase. The words sent ice through my veins. "Are you sure he won't notice anything?" Holly asked. "He's been acting suspicious lately, asking more questions." Marcus paused in his digging. "Has he said anything specific?" "No, but he's been watching me more carefully. Last week he asked me directly about the Thursday meetings. Wanted to know exactly who I was meeting with and what we were discussing." "What did you tell him?" "The same thing I always tell him. Boring office stuff, budget meetings, nothing he would be interested in." But I could see in his eyes that he wasn't completely buying it anymore. Marcus resumed his digging. "We stick to the plan. Everything is already in motion. The paperwork is filed. The insurance policies are updated. And after tonight, all the evidence will be buried where no one will ever find it." Insurance policies. My blood turned to ice as I realized what they were talking about. I thought about my life insurance policy, the one Holly had encouraged me to increase just last year. She had said it was important to make sure she was taken care of if anything happened to me. At the time, it had seemed like responsible financial planning. Now I understood it was something much more sinister. I watched them bury what looked like documents, small electronic devices, and several items I couldn't identify in the dim light. Whatever they were hiding, it was evidence of something they definitely didn't want discovered. "The doctor said the medication will take about 2 weeks to fully take effect," Holly said as they began filling in the hole. "After that, it should look completely natural. Heart failure in a 58-year-old man with a family history of heart disease. No one will question it. Medication. Heart failure. Family history." The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. My father had died of a heart attack at 61. My grandfather had died of heart disease at 59. Holly was right. If I suddenly developed heart problems and died, it would seem like unfortunate genetics rather than foul play. But what medication was she talking about? I didn't take any regular medications. Then I remembered the vitamins Holly had been encouraging me to take over the past few months. She had said she was worried about my health, especially given my family history, and that these particular supplements were designed to support heart health. I had been taking them faithfully every morning, trusting my wife to look out for my well-being. Those weren't vitamins. They were poison, slowly weakening my heart, preparing my body for the natural death they had planned for me. "What about the money transfer?" Marcus asked as they packed up their tools. "When do we execute that part?" "The papers are already signed," Holly replied. "I forged his signature months ago, and I've been practicing it until I can do it perfectly. The moment he's declared dead, I inherit everything. The house, the life insurance, his pension, everything. And according to our agreement, you get 40% of the total." 40%? I did some quick mental math. My life insurance policy was worth $200,000. My pension was worth approximately $300,000. The house was worth another $150,000. My various savings and investment accounts totaled around $100,000. They were planning to split roughly $750,000 after murdering me. Marcus was getting $300,000 to help my wife kill me. My own brother was willing to murder me for money. "And you're sure about the timeline?" Marcus asked as they finished cleaning up their work area. "The doctor said 2 to 3 weeks maximum," Holly said. "The medication builds up in his system gradually, so it will look like his heart just gave out from accumulated stress. No traces of anything unusual in his bloodstream by the time anyone thinks to test for it." They had a doctor helping them. This wasn't just a conspiracy between my wife and my brother. There was a medical professional involved, someone who had provided them with whatever drug they were using to slowly kill me. I backed away from the window, my mind reeling. I needed to get back to the living room before they finished in the backyard, and Holly came inside. She couldn't know that I had seen anything or heard anything. If she realized I knew about their plan, they might accelerate their timeline, or worse, they might decide to kill me in a way that looked like an accident rather than natural causes. As I made my way back to the recliner, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely walk straight. 32 years of marriage, and my wife was slowly poisoning me to death with the help of my own brother. The woman who had promised to love me in sickness and in health was systematically making me sick so she could inherit my money. The brother who had stood beside me at my wedding was planning to help bury me. I heard the back door open quietly and Holly's footsteps in the kitchen. I quickly arranged myself in the recliner as if I had fallen asleep, waiting for her to come home. I forced my breathing to slow and tried to relax my facial muscles, though everything inside me was screaming. Holly appeared in the living room doorway and I heard her sigh softly. "Alan?" she whispered. "Honey, are you awake?" I made a small noise as if I was waking up from a doze, then opened my eyes and smiled at her. "Oh, hey. I guess I fell asleep waiting for you. How was your meeting?" She smiled back, and it was the same warm, loving smile she had been giving me for over 3 decades. Looking at her now, knowing what I knew, it was impossible to believe that this woman who seemed so genuinely caring was planning my death. "It was long and boring," she said, walking over to kiss me on the forehead. "Budget discussions, staffing issues, you know how it is. I'm sorry I'm so late." Her lips on my forehead felt like ice, even though they were warm. This woman who was kissing me goodnight was the same woman who had just spent the evening bearing evidence of my planned murder. "It's okay," I managed to say. "I understand work can be demanding." She studied my face for a moment, and I wondered if she could see the terror I was trying to hide. "You look pale," she said, concern in her voice. "Are you feeling all right?" The irony was staggering. She was expressing worry about my health while actively destroying it. "Just tired," I said. "I think I'll head up to bed." "Good idea," she said. "Don't forget to take your vitamins in the morning. You know how important they are for your heart health." I nodded and kissed her cheek, tasting the betrayal on her skin. "I won't forget," I promised. As I walked up the stairs to our bedroom, I realized that I was now living in a horror movie of my own life. Every morning when I took those vitamins, I was participating in my own slow execution. Every kiss goodnight was a kiss from my would-be killer. Every I love you was a lie designed to keep me complacent until they were ready to finish what they had started. But now I knew the truth. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The next morning I woke up before my alarm clock, which wasn't unusual anymore. Over the past few months I had been sleeping more poorly, waking up multiple times during the night, feeling anxious and disoriented. I had attributed it to stress from work and getting older, but now I understood it was likely another side effect of whatever medication Holly was feeding me. She was already downstairs making coffee, humming softly to herself like she always did in the mornings. The normalcy of it was jarring after what I had discovered the night before. I could hear her moving around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, getting ready for another day of playing the loving wife while slowly killing her husband. I stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, trying to gather my courage. I needed to act completely normal, to give no indication that anything had changed. My life now depended on my ability to pretend that I was still the trusting, unsuspecting husband I had been 24 hours ago. "Good morning, sweetheart," Holly called from the kitchen when she heard me coming downstairs. "I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes." Blueberry pancakes. She had made them probably a dozen times over the past few months, always on Friday mornings after her Thursday night meetings. I had thought she was being extra loving, perhaps feeling guilty about being away so late the night before. Now I realized she was probably putting extra medication in the food to compensate for missing a day of vitamins. "That sounds wonderful," I called back, my voice sounding surprisingly normal. "You spoil me." I walked into the kitchen where Holly was standing at the stove, looking beautiful and domestic in her blue robe, her graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. She turned to smile at me, and for a split second I almost convinced myself that I had imagined everything from the night before. This was Holly, the woman who had cried at our daughter's wedding, who had held my hand through my father's funeral, who had supported me through every difficult moment of our marriage. But then I saw the small bottle of vitamins sitting on the counter next to a glass of orange juice, and reality crashed back over me. "Don't forget your vitamins," she said, kissing my cheek as I sat down at the table. "Dr. Peterson said they're especially important, given your family history." Dr. Peterson. I had never heard Holly mention that name before, but she said it so casually, as if I should know who she was talking about. We had been using the same family doctor, Dr. Williams, for over 15 years. Who was Dr. Peterson? And when had Holly started consulting with him about my health? "Right," I said carefully. "Dr. Peterson, remind me what he said again?" Holly didn't seem to notice anything unusual about my question. "Just that with your father's heart attack and your grandfather's heart disease, you really need to be proactive about cardiovascular health. The supplements he recommended are specifically designed to support heart function." She was lying so smoothly, so convincingly, that if I hadn't overheard her conversation with Marcus the night before, I would have believed every word. She had probably been practicing this story for months, refining it until it sounded completely natural. I picked up the vitamin bottle and examined it more closely than I ever had before. The label looked professional, with a pharmaceutical company logo and detailed ingredient listings. But now that I was looking for it, I could see that the label was slightly crooked, as if it had been applied by hand rather than by machine. This wasn't a real pharmaceutical product. It was something that had been specially prepared, probably by the mysterious Dr. Peterson. "I should probably schedule a follow-up appointment with him," I said, watching Holly's reaction carefully, "just to see how I'm responding to the supplements." For the briefest moment, I saw something flicker across Holly's face. Panic maybe, or calculation. But she recovered so quickly that if I hadn't been watching for it, I would have missed it completely. "Oh, that's not necessary," she said, turning back to the pancakes. "Dr. Peterson said the supplements are perfectly safe for long-term use. No monitoring required. Besides, you know how busy doctors are. He specifically said not to bother with follow-up appointments unless you experience side effects." Of course he had said that. They couldn't risk having me actually meet this Dr. Peterson and potentially discover that he wasn't really a doctor at all, or that he was involved in their plot to kill me. I forced myself to take the vitamins, swallowing them with the orange juice, knowing that I was ingesting poison but unable to refuse without arousing suspicion. As the pills went down my throat, I made a silent promise to myself that this would be the last time. I needed to figure out how to stop taking them without Holly noticing. During breakfast, I tried to gather more information without seeming suspicious. You know, I've been thinking about my health a lot lately, I said between bites of pancakes. Maybe I should update my will, just to make sure everything is in order. Holly's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Your will? Why would you be thinking about that? Well, you know, with the family history and everything, it seems responsible to make sure all our paperwork is current. When was the last time we reviewed our life insurance policies? Oh, Alan, Holly said, her voice taking on a slightly patronizing tone. You're being morbid. You're only 58 years old, and you're in good health. There's no need to start thinking about wills and insurance policies. But I could see in her eyes that she was thinking about exactly those things. She knew down to the dollar how much my death would be worth, because she had probably been calculating it for months. I suppose you're right, I said. I just want to make sure you're taken care of if anything ever happens to me. Nothing is going to happen to you, Holly said firmly. Not for many, many years. And when that time comes, hopefully when we're both very old, yes, I'll be fine. We've made sure of that. We've made sure of that. Not we've planned for that, or we've prepared for that, but we've made sure of that. As if my death was something that had already been arranged rather than something they were simply prepared for. After breakfast, Holly left for work with her usual kiss and reminder to take care of myself. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I was on the phone to our family lawyer. Jim, it's Alan Hartwell, I said when he answered. I need to ask you about something, and I need you to keep this conversation confidential. Of course, Alan. What can I help you with? Has Holly contacted you recently about updating our wills or changing our life insurance beneficiaries? There was a pause. Alan, you know I can't discuss communications with Holly without her permission, even to you. Jim, this is important. I'm not asking for details. I just need to know if she's been in touch with you. Another pause. Longer this time. No, Alan, Holly hasn't contacted me about anything in over 2 years. Is there something going on I should know about? If Holly hadn't been working with our family lawyer to update our legal documents, then she had been working with someone else. Someone who was helping her forge documents or create false papers that would ensure she inherited everything when I died. Jim, I need you to pull our current wills and insurance policies. I want to review everything. And I want to make sure nothing has been changed without my knowledge. I can have copies ready for you this afternoon, Jim said. Alan, are you in some kind of trouble? I wanted to tell him everything, but I didn't know who I could trust. If Holly had been planning this for months, if she had a doctor and possibly a lawyer helping her, then she might have been setting up safeguards against exactly this kind of discovery. I'll explain when I see you, I said. Can you have everything ready by 3 o'clock? After I hung up with Jim, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to stay alive long enough to expose what Holly and Marcus were doing. I also needed to search the house. If they had been planning this for months, there might be evidence hidden somewhere. Communications with Dr. Peterson, forged documents, information about the medication they were using. I had to be careful, though. If Holly came home unexpectedly and found me going through her things, it could accelerate their timeline. I started in Holly's home office, the small room where she paid bills and kept her personal papers. At first glance, everything looked normal. But when I started examining her files more carefully, I found a folder labeled medical information that I had never seen before. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. There were copies of my medical records from Dr. Williams, but they had been altered. Someone had added notes about heart palpitations, chest pain, and shortness of breath. Symptoms I had never reported because I had never experienced them. There were also prescription records for medications I had never taken, all related to heart conditions. They weren't just planning to kill me. They were creating a false medical history to support their story that I had been suffering from undiagnosed heart problems. When I died, these doctored records would convince investigators that my death was the result of natural causes that had been building up over time. But the most disturbing discovery was a series of printed emails between Holly and someone identified only as M, obviously Marcus. The emails detailed their entire plan, from the gradual poisoning to the burial of evidence to the financial arrangements they had made. One email from Marcus to Holly particularly stood out. Remember, the medication needs to be administered consistently. Dr. Peterson stressed that irregular doses could cause symptoms that might make him suspicious. Better to take longer and be safe than to rush and risk discovery. Another email from Holly to Marcus was even more chilling. Alan mentioned updating his will yesterday. I told him it wasn't necessary, but we may need to move faster than planned. How quickly can Dr. Peterson adjust the dosage? They had been monitoring my behavior, adjusting their plan based on anything I said or did that might indicate suspicion. They were treating my murder like a business project, with timelines and contingencies and progress reports. As I read through the emails, I realized that this conspiracy went deeper than just Holly, Marcus, and a corrupt doctor. There were references to other people, other arrangements, other aspects of the plan that I hadn't discovered yet. I photographed every document with my phone, making sure I had evidence of everything I had found. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I had found it. At 3 o'clock, I was sitting in Jim's office, reviewing our legal documents with growing horror. Our wills hadn't been changed, but our life insurance policies had been. Holly had added additional coverage that I didn't remember signing up for, bringing the total death benefit to $400,000 instead of the $200,000 I thought we had. The signature on the additional policy documents looked like mine, but when I examined it closely, I could see subtle differences. Holly had been forging my signature, just like she had bragged to Marcus about. "Jim," I said, looking up at my lawyer, "I think my wife is trying to kill me." Jim stared at me across his mahogany desk, his expression shifting from professional concern to genuine alarm. "Alan, that's a very serious accusation. Are you absolutely certain about what you are saying?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photographs I had taken of the emails and doctored medical records. As he read through them, his face grew pale. "My God," he whispered, This is attempted murder." "It's not attempted," I said grimly. "It's ongoing. She's been poisoning me for months, and according to what I overheard, I only have about 2 weeks left before the medication kills me." Jim immediately reached for his phone. "We need to call the police right now. These documents are evidence of conspiracy to commit murder." I put my hand on his arm to stop him. "No, not yet." "Alan, are you out of your mind? Your wife is trying to kill you." "I know that," I said. "But think about this logically. What evidence do we actually have? Some emails between Holly and someone identified only as, we can't prove that's Marcus. Some altered medical records that could have been doctored by anyone. A forged signature on an insurance policy that I could have signed and simply forgotten about." Jim frowned. "What about the medication? We could have it tested." "What medication?" "Those vitamin bottles will be long gone by the time police get a search warrant. Holly isn't stupid. The moment I involve law enforcement, she'll destroy all the evidence and claim I'm having some kind of breakdown. Remember, she's been creating a fake medical history that shows I've been having heart problems. Who's going to believe that I'm thinking clearly?" Jim leaned back in his chair, understanding the dilemma. "So what do you propose?" "I need to gather more evidence, and I need to do it without them knowing I'm onto them. I need proof that will be so overwhelming that there's no way they can talk their way out of it." Over the next hour, Jim and I developed a plan. First, I would continue taking the vitamins, but I would immediately vomit them up afterward when Holly wasn't around. This would prevent further poisoning while maintaining the appearance that I was still following their plan. Second, we would hire a private investigator to follow Holly and document her meetings with Marcus and this Dr. Peterson. Third, Jim would quietly begin gathering information about the forged insurance policies and any other financial documents that might have been altered. Most importantly, I would start wearing a recording device during conversations with Holly, trying to get her to reveal more details about their plan. Jim knew a former police detective who specialized in surveillance equipment who could set me up with something small and undetectable. "This is incredibly dangerous, Alan," Jim warned me as we finalized the details. "If they suspect that you know what they're doing, they might decide to speed up their timeline. Or they might try to make your death look like an accident instead of natural causes." I knew he was right, but I also knew that going to the police prematurely would just give Holly and Marcus a chance to destroy evidence and disappear. I needed to catch them in the act, to get them to incriminate themselves so thoroughly that there would be no possible defense. That evening, I went home and acted as normally as possible. Holly was in an unusually good mood, chatting about her day at work and asking about mine. She made my favorite dinner, pot roast with vegetables, and reminded me twice to take my evening vitamins. "You seem more relaxed lately," she observed as we cleaned up after dinner. "I was worried about you for a while there. You seem so anxious and paranoid." Paranoid, the irony, wasn't lost on me. My wife was literally poisoning me to death, and she was describing my growing suspicion as paranoia. "I've been trying to stress less about things I can't control," I said. "Life's too short to worry about everything." Holly smiled and hugged me. "That's my wise husband. I'm glad you're feeling better." After she went to bed, I followed through on the plan Jim and I had discussed. I went to the bathroom and forced myself to vomit up the vitamins I had taken after dinner. It was unpleasant, but knowing that I was purging poison from my system made it bearable. Over the next few days, I began to notice subtle changes in how I felt. The morning grogginess started to clear up. The anxiety and heart palpitations that had been bothering me for weeks began to diminish. The difficulty sleeping improved dramatically. Whatever medication they had been giving me was slowly working its way out of my system, and I was starting to feel like myself again. The private investigator Jim had recommended, a woman named Sarah Chen, began surveillance on Thursday morning. She followed Holly to work, then tracked her movements throughout the day. What she discovered was that Holly wasn't going to work at all on Thursdays. She was driving to a medical office building in a different part of town, where she spent several hours in a suite rented by someone calling himself Dr. Richard Peterson. Sarah was able to determine that Dr. Peterson wasn't actually a licensed physician in our state. He was a disgraced doctor who had lost his medical license in California 3 years earlier for participating in an insurance fraud scheme. He had moved to our state and was apparently continuing his criminal activities under a fake identity. The surveillance also revealed that Marcus was driving down from Birmingham every Thursday morning and meeting with Holly and Dr. Peterson. They were spending hours together, clearly planning and coordinating their operation. But the most disturbing discovery came on Thursday evening, when Sarah followed them to a storage unit facility on the outskirts of town. Using telephoto lenses, she was able to photograph them, removing and examining what appeared to be medical equipment, heart monitors, defibrillators, and other devices that would be used to simulate a heart attack. They weren't just planning to poison me until my heart failed naturally. They were preparing to induce a heart attack using medical equipment, then used Dr. Peterson's false credentials to sign a death certificate claiming I had died of natural causes. When Sarah showed me the photographs on Friday afternoon, I felt sick to my stomach. The level of planning and preparation was staggering. This wasn't a crime of passion or a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had been working on this for months, maybe even years, creating false identities, gathering equipment, and perfecting their method. "There's something else," Sarah said, pulling out another set of photographs. "They're not planning to wait much longer." The photos showed Holly and Marcus loading the medical equipment into the white pickup truck I had seen that first night. They were bringing the equipment to our house, which meant they were ready to implement the final phase of their plan. "Based on what I observed," Sarah continued, "I believe they're planning to do this tomorrow night, Saturday night when the neighborhood is quiet and there's less chance of interference. Tomorrow night, less than 24 hours from now, my wife and my brother were planning to murder me in my own home, using medical equipment to simulate a heart attack and a fake doctor to cover up the evidence. I thought about confronting Holly directly, demanding an explanation, giving her a chance to call off the whole thing. But I knew it was too late for that. They had invested too much time and money and effort into this plan. They wouldn't abandon it now just because I had discovered their secret. Instead, I needed to turn the tables on them. I needed to let them think their plan was proceeding normally, while actually preparing a trap that would expose them completely. That evening I went home and behaved exactly as I had been behaving for the past few days. Normal, unsuspecting, perhaps even a little more trusting and affectionate than usual. I wanted Holly to feel confident that I had no idea what was coming. "I was thinking we should do something special this weekend," I told her over dinner. "Maybe drive up to the lake, stay at that bed and breakfast you like." Holly's smile seemed forced. That sounds lovely, but maybe we should wait until next weekend. I'm feeling a little under the weather and I'd hate to ruin the trip. She was stalling, making excuses to keep me at home tomorrow night. Everything was confirming that Saturday was when they planned to act. Of course, I said. Your health is more important than any trip. We'll stay home and relax. That night, as Holly slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake finalizing my own plan. Jim had arranged for police to be on standby, ready to move at a moment's notice. Sarah would be positioned outside our house with recording equipment to document everything that happened. And I would be wearing a wire capturing every word of their confession when they thought I was dying. Tomorrow night, Holly and Marcus would discover that the man they were trying to murder had been planning his own surprise for them. But first I had to make it through Saturday without arousing any suspicion. I had to continue playing the role of the trusting husband who had no idea his wife was planning to kill him. And I had to do it knowing that in less than 24 hours, everything would either be over or I would be dead. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I wondered what Holly was dreaming about. Was she thinking about the $400,000 she would inherit? Was she imagining her life with Marcus after I was gone? Or was she feeling any guilt at all about what she was planning to do to the man who had loved her faithfully for 32 years? Tomorrow night I would find out exactly who my wife really was, underneath the mask she had been wearing all these months. And she would discover that the man she thought was her helpless victim had been preparing a few surprises of his own. Saturday unfolded with an eerie normalcy that made everything feel surreal. Holly made breakfast, we read the newspaper together, and she even suggested we watch one of our favorite old movies in the afternoon. To anyone observing us, we looked like a perfectly content married couple enjoying a quiet weekend at home. But I could see the tension in Holly's movements, the way she checked her phone more frequently than usual, the forced quality of her smiles. She was preparing herself mentally for what was going to happen that evening. Every kind gesture, every loving word was her way of saying goodbye to the facade she had been maintaining for months. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Holly announced that she needed to run a few errands. Just some grocery shopping and a quick stop at the pharmacy, she said, kissing my cheek. I should be back in a couple of hours. I knew she wasn't going shopping. She was meeting with Marcus and Dr. Peterson for final preparations, making sure everyone knew their role in the evening's events. This was my opportunity to complete my own preparations. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I was on the phone with Jim and Sarah. It's happening tonight, I told them. Holly just left for what she's calling errands, but based on the surveillance, this is when they do their final planning. Sarah confirmed that she was already in position in a van parked down the street, equipped with long-range cameras and recording equipment. Jim assured me that police were standing by at a location 5 minutes away, ready to move the moment I gave the signal. I spent the next hour setting up the recording equipment that would capture everything that happened. In addition to the wire I would be wearing, we had installed tiny cameras in strategic locations around the house. The living room, kitchen, and bedroom. Everything that Holly and Marcus said and did would be recorded from multiple angles. The hardest part was the waiting. By 6 o'clock, I was pacing the house, checking and rechecking the equipment, trying to stay calm. I needed to appear completely normal when Holly returned, which meant controlling my nerves and maintaining the same relaxed demeanor I had been projecting all week. Holly came home at 6:30, carrying grocery bags that probably contained nothing more than props for her cover story. She seemed more relaxed than she had been all day, as if the final planning meeting had relieved her anxiety about the evening ahead. "How was your day?" she asked, starting to prepare dinner. "Quiet and peaceful," I replied. "I took a long nap this afternoon. I feel more rested than I have in months." It was true. Getting the poison out of my system had made an enormous difference in how I felt physically. But I also knew that appearing well-rested and healthy would make Holly feel more confident about proceeding with their plan. They needed me to seem normal and unsuspecting. We had dinner together, and Holly was more talkative than she had been in weeks. She told me stories about her co-workers, asked about my plans for the following week, and generally acted like a woman who was genuinely interested in her husband's life. If I hadn't known what she was planning, I would have thought we were having one of our best conversations in months. At 8 o'clock, Holly suggested we watch television together in the living room. She made us each a cup of coffee, and I noticed that she was very careful about which cup she handed to me. I was certain that my coffee contained a heavy dose of the medication they had been giving me, probably enough to make me drowsy and compliant for what was about to happen. I drank the coffee without hesitation, knowing that I would find a way to purge it from my system before it took full effect. Holly sat beside me on the couch and we watched a comedy show together, laughing at the jokes like any normal couple on a Saturday night. At 9:30, Holly got up to use the bathroom and I quickly went to the kitchen and forced myself to vomit up the drugged coffee. When I returned to the living room, I made sure to appear slightly drowsy, as if the medication was beginning to take effect. "Are you feeling all right?" Holly asked, studying my face with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Just tired," I said, allowing my voice to sound slightly slurred. "I think I might be coming down with something." Holly nodded sympathetically. "You should probably get some rest. Why don't you go upstairs and lie down? I'll clean up down here and join you in a little bit." This was it. The moment when Holly would signal Marcus and Dr. Peterson that I was incapacitated and ready for the final phase of their plan. I went upstairs and lay down on our bed, but I didn't close my eyes. Through the recording equipment, I could hear Holly moving around downstairs, and then I heard her make a phone call. "He's ready," she said quietly. "He drank the coffee about 30 minutes ago, and he's already showing signs of drowsiness. Yes, he's upstairs in the bedroom. You can come in through the back door. I'll leave it unlocked." 10 minutes later, I heard the back door open, followed by hushed voices in the kitchen. Marcus had arrived, and based on the equipment Sarah had observed them loading, Dr. Peterson was probably with him. I listened as they moved through the house, setting up their equipment in the living room directly below our bedroom. I could hear the soft hum of electronic devices being powered on, the rustle of medical supplies being arranged. "How long before he's completely unconscious?" I heard Marcus ask. "Dr. Peterson said the dosage I gave him should have him under within another 15 minutes, Holly replied. "Once he's out, we'll have about an hour window to complete everything before the medication starts to wear off." An hour. They were planning to spend an hour using medical equipment to simulate a heart attack, then position my body and create a scene that would convince investigators I had died of natural causes in my sleep. "What about afterwards?" Marcus asked. "How long before someone finds the body?" "I'll wait until Monday morning," Holly said. "I'll call in sick to work, then around noon I'll go upstairs and discover him. I'll call 911 and by the time paramedics arrive, rigor mortis will have set in. Dr. Peterson's death certificate will show cardiac arrest due to underlying heart disease." They had planned every detail, right down to the timing of when my body would be discovered. Holly was going to spend an entire day in the house with my corpse, waiting for the optimal time to play the role of the grieving widow. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. This was my signal to Jim and the police that it was time to move. I pressed the small button on my recording device that would send an alert to Sarah's van, then arranged myself on the bed as if I was unconscious. Holly entered the bedroom first, followed by Marcus and a man I didn't recognize who must have been Dr. Peterson. They approached the bed cautiously, and Holly reached out to check my pulse. "He's out," she whispered. "Pulse is strong but slow. Perfect." Dr. Peterson moved to the other side of the bed and began attaching electrodes to my chest. The equipment he was using looked sophisticated and expensive. Definitely not something you could buy at a medical supply store without proper credentials. "This will simulate a massive coronary event," Dr. Peterson explained in a clinical tone. "The electrical patterns will cause actual cardiac arrest, but it will appear completely natural on any subsequent examination. The medication in his system will prevent any chance of resuscitation. They were going to electrocute me, not just poison me or smother me, but actually stop my heart using medical equipment." The coldness of it, the technical precision, made it even more horrifying than I had imagined. "How much will this hurt?" Holly asked, and for a moment I thought I heard a trace of uncertainty in her voice. "He won't feel anything," Dr. Peterson assured her. "The medication has him completely unconscious, and even if it didn't, cardiac arrest is typically instantaneous. No suffering." Marcus moved closer to the bed. "Are you sure this will look natural? No signs of external trauma?" "The electrode marks will be completely undetectable after I remove them," Dr. Peterson said. "And the electrical signature will match that of a natural heart attack. Perfectly. I've done this before. He had done this before. Dr. Peterson wasn't just a disgraced doctor helping with his first murder. He was a serial killer who specialized in making deaths appear natural. Just to be clear about our agreement, Marcus said to Holly. I get 40% of everything, the life insurance, the house sale proceeds, all of it. 40% of $400,000 is $160,000, Holly replied, plus half of whatever the house sells for. That should be at least another $50,000. You're looking at over $200,000, Marcus. And Dr. Peterson gets his $50,000 fee, as agreed, Marcus continued. $50,000 is a bargain for this kind of service, Dr. Peterson said. Most people in my position charge considerably more. They were discussing the financial details of my murder while standing over my supposedly unconscious body. The greed, the callousness, the complete lack of human emotion. It was beyond anything I could have imagined. Dr. Peterson began making final adjustments to his equipment. I'm ready to proceed, he announced. Once I activate the device, cardiac arrest will occur within 30 seconds. Are you both prepared to witness this? We're ready, Holly said, and I could hear her moving closer to the bed. That's when I opened my eyes and sat up. The shock on their faces was immediate and complete. Holly stumbled backward, her hands flying to her mouth. Marcus went pale and started looking around the room as if searching for an escape route. Dr. Peterson froze with his hand on the electrical device. Surprise, I said calmly, pulling the recording wire from under my shirt. I heard every word. Before any of them could react, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as police cars approached the house. Sarah had received my signal and called in the cavalry. Alan, Holly stammered. What? How are you? Awake? I finished for her. I stopped taking your poison vitamins a week ago, Holly, and I've been recording everything you've said and done. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs announced the arrival of the police. Within seconds, our bedroom was filled with armed officers, shouting commands for everyone to get on the ground. As they handcuffed Holly, she looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, pure hatred. You were supposed to die, she hissed. You were supposed to be dead by now. Sorry to disappoint you, I replied. But I had other plans. Marcus was already in handcuffs, and Dr. Peterson was being read his rights. The medical equipment was being photographed and collected as evidence. Everything they had planned to use to kill me was now proof of their conspiracy to commit murder. As the police led them away, Holly turned back one final time. 32 years, Alan, she said. 32 years I wasted on you. No, Holly, I corrected her. 32 years you pretended to love me while planning to kill me. The waste was all on your side. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom and watched as the judge sentenced Holly to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus received 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Dr. Peterson, who turned out to have killed at least 3 other people in similar schemes, was sentenced to death. The house felt different after everything that happened. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I sold it and moved across the country to Oregon, where I had always wanted to live but never felt free to go. I bought a small cabin near the coast with no neighbors close enough to see my lights at night. There are no street lights here, no mysterious delivery boys with cryptic warnings. Just the sound of the ocean and the knowledge that I survived something that should have killed me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that pizza delivery boy hadn't warned me to watch for the street light to go out. Would I have discovered Holly's plan in time? Would I be dead now, buried somewhere while she and Marcus spent my money and congratulated themselves on the perfect crime? But I don't dwell on those thoughts. Instead, I focus on the future I never expected to have. A life free from poison, free from lies, free from the woman who spent 3 decades pretending to love me while planning my death. The streetlight never went out for me. Instead, it illuminated the truth just in time to save my life.